The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I'm so glad you're with me today. We have so much to talk about. I want to start with this. If you are angry that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by even more than I told you last week, but Donald Trump is going to be our next president, it almost sounds like I'm telling a joke, but no, Donald Trump is going to be our next president, then you can actually do something about it. And this is a bigger and bigger discussion among progressives and among some Republicans, where we know that in nearly 10% of elections, because of this thing called the Electoral College, the candidate with more votes doesn't become president. So we know about 2016 with Hillary Clinton. That's not even a week old. Most of us remember 2000 with Al Gore. There was also, as Pat told us last week, 1824, 1876, and 1888. The math tells us that in 8.6% of elections for president in the United States, the candidate who receives more votes does not win. Now, even Trump agrees with the fact that this doesn't really seem good. This may be something that now he would change his mind on, although yesterday in his 60 Minutes interview, he still did say, no, he stands by his comments. I'll remind you what Donald Trump previously said about the Electoral College, where he says, more votes equals a loss, revolution. Let's fight like hell and stop this great and disgusting injustice. The world is laughing at us. We can't let this happen. We should march on Washington and stop this travesty. The phony Electoral College made a laughingstock out of our nation. The loser won. Of course, Donald Trump writing O-N-E. I'm sure he meant W-O-N as far as won. So even Trump agrees with us on this. And I already discussed last week with you why this system is particularly terrible now, given that many of the reasons for the original creation of the Electoral College are no longer relevant. If you believe in one person, one vote, the Electoral College goes against that. And Pat explained last week the disproportionate power that voters in swing states have. But it's even more than that. Even the number of electoral votes doesn't directly relate to the number of voters in a state. And if you look based on population and electoral votes, for example, based on 2012 results, and we can put this graph up for people to see, a Texas voter has a quarter of the electoral power as a Wyoming voter. And this is based on the number of people per electoral vote. In Texas, there are 750,000 voters for one electoral vote. And as you can see here, as you go to the right of this graph, in North Dakota, in Alaska, in Vermont, there are fewer voters per electoral vote, meaning that voters have a different amount of electoral power. Now, this is totally aside from the reality that if you vote for the loser in your state, your vote essentially has no meaning and value. And this is where we even get the concepts of third-party protest votes and no votes and all of these other things. This is something that is a really big deal to a lot of people, and not just because it led to Hillary Clinton losing. Now, one path to changing this system is a constitutional amendment. I say basically forget about that, Pat. I mean, it's almost pointless to discuss a constitutional amendment to change our voting system.
Right. A constitutional amendment hasn't happened since the 1970s. It's been a whole generation. And on a topic like this, where it's really not partisan either way, it's not going to happen.
It's partisan right now, and it's sort of feeling that way. But over time, both Republicans and Democrats have said, this is not really the best system. Now, a better path forward is something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. I mentioned this last week. The idea is a state can decide that no matter how our state votes, we will cast our electoral ballots for the winner of the popular vote. And remember, Donald Trump said it best himself, as I previously told you. I'll put this tweet up on the screen for you. The Electoral College is a disaster for democracy. So how would this work? Step one, states sign this Interstate Popular Vote Compact. For now, nothing changes. Once you have enough states agreeing to the National Interstate Popular Vote Compact, that in total they add up to 270 electoral votes, enough to win the election, they say from now on, we will give our electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. This is very popular. 70% support for a nationwide vote for president. And so far, there are 10 states plus the District of Columbia that are in favor of this. This is about 165 combined electoral votes. You need 105 more. There's active legislation in Arizona, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Missouri. That would add 57 electoral votes, which would get us to 222. This, Pat, is actually the best path forward for a national popular vote.
Yeah, I think it sounds great. My concern is that some states will take on the method of Nebraska and Maine, which is to split votes by congressional district, which sounds like it would be more representative. But the fact is that these districts have been so badly gerrymandered that it would really just give the Republicans a large boost.
In theory, the idea of just proportional electoral vote allocation in every single state sounds not bad. But because of what we've seen with these districts and gerrymandering, it's really a disaster. If you're a single red voice in a blue sea, if you are a blue voice in a red a sea, call it what you want, you would end up feeling much less disenfranchised with a national popular vote. It should be done away with. It is very undemocratic, and we're going to be including this. We've got some big announcements to make on the show, and this discussion is going to be a really, really big part of that. I want to talk to you about something very, very serious, and we need to be looking at the data that I'm going to present to you today, and it has everything to do with a rigged election, but not a rigged election in Hillary Clinton's favor. In fact, quite the opposite. We've looked at exit polls, and a number of data analysts have looked at exit polls from the November 8th presidential election. There are 4 key battleground states that Hillary Clinton ultimately lost according to the vote counts, but won according to the exit polls, okay? North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida. Had Hillary Clinton won those states, she would have won the presidential election. Hillary Clinton also won the national exit poll by 3.2%, but as you've been probably seeing, she is only ahead in the popular vote, which she did win by somewhere around 0.5 percentage point. Let me give you some of the numbers, and then we're really going to dig into this. And stay with me because this is absolutely huge. Greg Palast is flat out saying this election was stolen from Hillary Clinton. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I want to present the data to you, and then we'll hear what you have to say and what else comes of this. Exit polls were done in 28 states. In 23 of those states, the discrepancy between the exit poll and the actual reported vote count favored Donald Trump. So when we look at exit polls versus reported vote counts, in 5 states, it was an error or a discrepancy, we will call it, or an inaccuracy in Hillary Clinton's favor. In 23 of those 28 states, it was a discrepancy in Donald Trump's favor. And in 13 of those 23, the discrepancy exceeded the margin of error of the exit poll. Now, some people might be saying, David, we can't trust polls. Look at what happened before the election. You are fundamentally misunderstanding how exit polls are done. Exit polls have nothing to do with pre-election opinion polls about who people say they're going to vote for, likely voters, registered voters. Exit polls are widely considered to be accurate, absolutely within the margin of error. Let's take a look at this image from TDPS Research, okay? And if you're not watching, I'll basically tell you what are the key issues here. If you look at North Carolina, you will see in the third column that Donald Trump lost North Carolina by 2 in the exit polls, yet won by 3.8 in the vote count. That is a 5.8 point swing relative to the exit polls. Is this proof of some kind of fraud? Well, no, it isn't, but that's a big difference. Look at Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, Trump lost by 4.4 in the exit polls, but won by 1.1 in the vote count. That is a 5.5 percentage point swing. Look at Wisconsin, where Donald Trump lost by 3.9% in the exit polls and won by 0.9%. That is a 4.8% swing. And Florida, which is often one of the closest of all states, Donald Trump lost by 1.4% in the exit polls, won by 1.3% in the vote count. That is a 2.7 swing. Now, this isn't my opinion or that of anybody in particular. When the vote count varies from the exit polls by more than the margin of error, It is considered an indicator of election fraud or irregularities. This is not David Pakman saying it. This is not Pat Ford saying it, although by all means, I'll allow him to say it if he wants to. This is the U.S. Agency for International Development, which actually states in last year's booklet, a discrepancy between the votes reported by the voters, which is what exit polls are, and official results may suggest that the results have been manipulated. I want to get out ahead of one reaction from right-wingers that there will be, which, as I mentioned before, the pre-election polls were wrong. How can we trust exit polls? A trumpeter that I personally know over the weekend, Pat, said to me, the exit polls are bogus. Look at the pre-election polls. An exit poll is conducted completely differently than opinion polls. It is two different things, and exit polls historically have been very accurate. If you look at Florida in 2000, if you adjust for the 181,000 rejected ballots by Katherine Harris, the exit polls were spot on in how they differed from what was the official vote count. And there are many examples. Ohio in 2004. This is a real concern, Pat.
This is really the irony of all ironies, right? Because Trump beforehand was saying that the election was going to be rigged.
Yeah, might have been.
But you're not going to see Hillary Clinton do that. I mean, she's not going to question the integrity of the vote after the fact.
No, and it's going to depend on people like us and people like those in our audience and the bloggers that are starting to look at this to investigate, because the numbers are very, very suspect. Let me know your thoughts. Take a look at the data. We're linking to it in the description to this YouTube video. If you're listening on the radio or watching on TV anywhere else, you can find this YouTube clip on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show. Look at the data yourself. These are irregular, highly irregular results, and they are mostly in states where there was surprise about what the official vote totals were. And of course, we know about all sorts of people scrubbed from the voter rolls in one of these states, North Carolina. We've got all sorts of reports about very weird things going on. Lo and behold, we've got exit polls, historically dead accurate exit polls that really don't make any sense. Let's look into this. Let's keep in touch about this. Donald Trump has done what I call an insta-flip. Donald Trump is making it very clear that he has completely bamboozled his supporters. The trumpeters have been completely bamboozled into supporting a guy who is not going to do a ton of what he told them he was going to do. During his presidential campaign, Donald Trump must have pledged hundreds, probably thousands of times that he is going to repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Tons of his supporters, when asked at campaign rallies and during interviews, what do you like the most about Trump policy-wise? Many of them couldn't put together any answer, but the ones that could would say, I like that he's going to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And on that note, Donald Trump has now done what I am calling an insta-flip. Within hours of being elected president of the United States, right after his meeting with President Obama, he said, you know what? Lots of those provisions in Obamacare, which I've been saying is a disaster and we're going to get rid of, they're pretty good provisions, and I'm going to keep them. He's going to keep the ban on insurers denying coverage for pre-existing conditions. That is a major change created by the Affordable Care Act. Told the Wall Street Journal he also likes the idea of keeping young adults up to age 26 on their parents' policies if they want to be, a major component of the Affordable Care Act, saying, quote, I like those very much. Pat, Obamacare is a disaster. It must go. It is terrible in every way. I like a lot of these provisions very much, and I plan to keep them. Will his supporters ever realize that they have been bamboozled?
They probably will start to, but it's honestly good news. I mean, a year ago, Trump went on 60 Minutes and said that everyone needed to be taken care of under some sort of healthcare plan, and that the government would pay for it, but we would save so much money on the other end. Honestly, if we were going to get some sort of Republican out of this election, sure, Trump is a demagogue and there's so many things to go after him on. He's honestly willing to compromise on some things, and this is one of them.
I am increasingly thinking that unless Pence gets to him, and more than likely, I'll tell you later, Pence is going to be running the show here. That's probably the reality, and that's horrible. But these are provisions that most people like a lot. We know from polling, if you remember before and during the passage of the Affordable Care Act, when people were asked, what's your opinion of this provision, without saying this is part of Obamacare, this is a communist takeover of healthcare, do you like this provision? These provisions were very, very popular, and there's a very good chance that Donald Trump could repeal Obamacare by name, create something new, which is very similar to it, and say, hey, I did it. It's Trump care. And then his supporters, without having the capacity to realize, well, it's called something else, so it must be different, they would say, hey, Trump did it. He repealed it. We won again. America is now great.
Well, it really is amazing. If you ask people what they think about healthcare companies being allowed to deny patients based on pre-existing conditions, it's overwhelmingly unpopular.
Absolutely.
People being able to stay on their parents' healthcare until they're 26 is widely popular, and mandating that companies with over 50 employees have to provide healthcare coverage for their employees, also very popular. But when you ask about Obamacare overall, they say they don't like it.
Yeah, no, we don't like that at all. This is also about, you know, what we're going to see in terms of who has Trump's ear, because he said this pretty shortly after speaking to President Obama. And by all reports, he was totally shell-shocked by that meeting. We'll talk about that later. But Trump often just thinks what the last person said to him is the best thing. If 10 minutes after saying this to the Wall Street Journal, Steve Bannon or Reince Priebus go, hey, by the way, that's bad stuff. We don't want those things. All of a sudden, that's Trump's new position. We have to remember that Trump often just goes with, it's like a little kid and attention deficit and just very, very a pliable mind, where the last thing someone told him is the best idea.
And that's so concerning, because as president, you're going to have so many people in your ear. You're going to have so many voices to choose from.
Yep.
And if you just go with the last person, I mean, that's really not the way to go.
It's not exactly the way to run a country. And we'll talk later about the fact that Trump is clearly completely confused and bewildered by what the job of president is. And that's not a good realization to have days after you've been elected president of the United States. Let's take a break. What a weekend of news, and we've got all of it for you coming up.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is April Soto. April, thank you and everybody who has signed up in record numbers after the election of Donald Trump last week to support the program. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. We do have the 2017 David Pakman Show calendars now available, still flying off the shelves. You can get these free with your membership at davidpakman.com/calendar17. You can also get just the calendar at davidpakman.com/calendar17. And remember, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, stop by davidpakman.com/Amazon before shopping. I spoke last week about the possible silver lining of the horrific election of Donald Trump to the White House. Republicans will be controlling the House of Representatives. Republicans will be controlling the Senate in the United States. And the silver lining may be that progressives have been activated in a real way, a way I've not seen for many years. Under a Hillary Clinton presidency, maybe progressives would have been sort of pacified in spite of a Republican House and Senate by what would have been a very centrist Democrat. People now are recognizing, you should see my email, what is at stake here? Record membership signups, members and viewers getting in touch saying, David, you need to be doing more. Corporate media has failed us. We cannot rely on what we got from corporate media again for the next 2, 4, and 6 years. The show is one thing, but we do need to be doing more, and we need to be actively catalyzing progressives to get involved in very specific ways. So in addition to what we are now doing and growing membership in ways, to quote George W. Bush, like we've never been able to do so before, we will be launching a major fundraiser soon, and we're finalizing the details, but I spent a lot of the weekend. I was thinking of having the weekend, the long weekend, to sort of decompress and relax after the election, but I spent much of the weekend working with some of our longtime supporters, figuring out the path forward, and we are going to be launching a fundraiser campaign. I don't know exactly when, but it's going to be soon, okay? We are going to be creating an activism arm of the David Pakman Show. We've been talking about progressives need to be coordinated on what to do at the state level, at the local level. Republicans are crushing progressives, and this is party aside, but we need to get progressive candidates elected locally. We need to be able to focus progressives on what steps can we take now. Did you know that there are 2 gubernatorial elections in 2017? Many people emailing me, understandably, and saying we've got to focus on 2018. We've got 2 opportunities in 2017 that could prove very important for the 2020 census. So there will be more details soon, but we are going to be doing something major. The show is going to obviously continue to grow, but by adding an activism component and a coordinator for activating progressives, which will then be disseminated through the show, we are going to be able to redouble or even more many of our efforts. If you want to be an early donor, please get in touch. I know there are lots of people in the audience who have been emailing me saying, David, I'm already a member, but we've got to be doing more. Let me know what it is that we can do. And I'm there. Well, I'm letting you know right now. If you have premium ideas for this fundraiser, if you want anything that you want to, if you have stuff you want to communicate to me about what the goals of this fundraiser should be and the best ways to leverage the 200 station national presence that we've built, plus YouTube and DirecTV, Dish Network, the podcast, etc., let me know. It became very clear over the weekend that people want to be involved. Get in touch more soon. And in the meantime, please continue to sign up for membership in the record numbers that you have. We've got the 2017 calendars available at davidpakman.com/calendar17. And you can use the coupon. This is blowing up. I voted 17, all one word. I voted 17. You pick any membership at davidpakman.com/membership. I voted 17 gives you a 40% discount off of your membership. I want you involved at any price. Anything that you're saying, here's my $3 a month. If 6 is not affordable, all of this is going to be huge going forward, and more on that very, very soon. The New York Times has reported that Donald Trump wants to spend most of his time at his New York penthouse rather than the White House. Advisors told the New York Times that Donald Trump wants to spend weekends at Trump Tower, maybe at his New Jersey golf course, or maybe Mar-a-Lago, his resort in Florida. The most shocking sort of remark is actually Trump not seeming to realize what is involved in being president of the United States. A quote from this New York Times article: "The questions that Donald Trump asked President Obama reflect what Trump's advisors described as the president-elect's coming to grips with the fact that his life is about to radically change." If you are just realizing the scope of the job of president of the United States 2 days after you've been voted in, when you're talking to the current president, this is a red flag, Pat. We've got an emergency here.
Right, and we've always questioned Donald Trump's work ethic. It seems like he likes to go around and speak at rallies, but when it gets to going through policy, having through these sort of cabinet meetings, he just doesn't seem interested in it.
No, he doesn't, and I'm going to get to that a little bit more. As far as Trump wanting to mostly spend time places other than the White House, or partially spend time at places other than the White House, 2/7 or 3/7 of his time elsewhere, who's going to pay to fortify Trump Tower or Mar-a-Lago or whatever? The taxpayers, of course. Who's going to pay for all the meetings that would normally happen at the White House, but instead will require lawmakers to travel to New York City or Florida or this golf course in New Jersey? Taxpayers, of course. Fiscal conservatism, right? Make America great again.
And I'm sure it's going to be a security hazard, too, to have the president of the United States in the middle of Manhattan all the time.
Yeah.
The White House has a long tradition of being a very secure area. We think about the Situation Room with all the tech that they have, and the underground tunnel system as well.
Right.
That's not going to happen in Trump Tower.
Yeah, Trump Tower now. But the really disturbing part isn't this. This is just sort of part of Trump's lack of connection with the real world in terms of what the job entails. We have now learned that Trump didn't really realize what the president did until he met with President Obama last week. And I have been saying to friends, did you see those pictures when he came out of that meeting, when they were taking pictures sitting in the Oval Office? Trump really looked shell-shocked. And my thought was, this guy's realizing he's in over his head. It turns out that that was absolutely true. We have a report now from the Wall Street Journal saying that Donald Trump was, quote, surprised by the scope of the president's responsibilities. Well, yeah. And according to the Wall Street Journal, Trump's aides were also unaware that the entire staff of the president that works in the White House West Wing would need to be replaced. I guess they thought the staff came with the building or something. I know Trump has done untraditional real estate deals, but everybody seemed so clueless about what is going on here.
And President Obama was criticized for enjoying campaigning, but not really liking the work of dealing with other people and presidenting, if that's even a word.
President Obama is going to strike us as just the most epically prepared guy going in compared to what is going on with Donald Trump. Remember, though, in spite of not knowing what the president does, we have to believe Trump that he knows more about ISIS than the generals. He knows more about the economy than economists. The reality is that although many people are emailing me saying, I hope Trump quits, number one, he's not going to quit, but Mike Pence is basically going to be president. And that is arguably much, much worse than Donald Trump being president, because as we know, Mike Pence is actually far more dangerous than Donald Trump. Donald Trump, at long last, when the rubber hits the road, had similar positions to Bernie Sanders on a number of issues. Mike Pence is a lunatic right-wing bomb thrower who is off the rails on basically every issue. At least Trump is sort of hinged, I guess is the opposite of unhinged, on some issues. Very, very scary stuff. The trumpeters, they have no clue. They don't care. They'll explain it away because of how great America is going to be after Trump makes it that way. We do have an update about the Trump-Russia connection. We had this question throughout the entire campaign. How much Trump coordination happened with Russia? How much contact was there? And there's been a notable lack of criticism from the right about what seemed to be connections between Trump and Russia. And there's also been a notable benefit to Donald Trump's campaign from believed Russian hacking. And of course, we had these suspicions that part of the reason why the Trump tax returns weren't released was because it would have exposed a Russia connection, which I guess would have been damaging. Although, like Trump said, he could shoot people on Fifth Avenue. His supporters would still support him. He could probably reveal connections to Russia, financial connections, and his supporters more than likely would still support him. Well, it's all come off the walls in the last week. Senior Russian diplomat and deputy foreign minister. I can't even believe I'm doing this story, Pat. This guy's name is Sergei Ryabkov, probably the pronunciation. As I mentioned, he's the deputy foreign minister in Russia. He's confirmed that Russian government officials were communicating directly with members of Donald Trump's campaign team. He was quoted as saying, "We have just begun to consider ways of building dialogue with the future Donald Trump administration and channels we will be using for those purposes." Now, immediately, Trump spokeswoman Hope Hicks said, "Oh, yeah, that's not true. We've had no contact with Russian officials before Tuesday's elections." I want to be super, super clear. Donald Trump has denied many times having financial or other ties to Moscow, period. If that ends up being proven false to any extent, it will be yet another example of the not politician lies, but just flat out bold-faced lies of the Trump campaign. And this is not proof, Pat. This statement from the Russian diplomat is not proof. You can make the argument that he's saying this specifically to make Trump look bad. At this point, it's pretty clear that Vladimir Putin sees Trump as an opportunity to have sanctions lifted on Russia. So it doesn't strike me as sort of motivationally precise or accurate to think that Russia's just going to make this up because they want Trump to reduce sanctions on them. This is not proof, but it is very concerning.
If proof did surface, it wouldn't be surprising at all because Trump's second campaign manager, Paul Manafort, actually had to resign because he had lobbying ties to pro-Russian oligarchs in Ukraine. And some of this stuff doesn't even have to be a clandestine operation. Trump at a rally asked for Russian hackers to produce the 30,000 missing emails from Hillary Clinton. Yeah, right out in the open. And one of the more interesting countries to watch over the next 4 years is going to be Russia. They got a green light from Washington, D.C. that they are no longer going to stand in the way. It's hard to predict the outcome, but I think a far more aggressive Russia is obvious. What they plan on doing with this increased aggressiveness is not totally clear, but it's very clear that the broader goal will be Putin wants Russia legitimized as a mainstream top player in geopolitics. It's also important to feed Vladimir Putin's ego. That's always a top priority in Russia. Think about how backwards this campaign was. Republicans claimed to hate infrastructure spending. Trump had the biggest infrastructure spending proposal of anybody. Republicans love getting involved as the world policeman. Trump says no getting involved with Middle East dictators. Similar position to Bernie Sanders. Republicans still vote for him. And of course, Republicans don't like Russia. They criticized Obama as a sissy for not starting a war with Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine. And now I'm sure they'll praise Trump for, quote, dealing pragmatically with the Russians by letting them do whatever the hell they want and letting Vladimir Putin play Trump like a violin. It is amazing what Republicans voted for, and prediction, it will be amazing what Republicans accept in the name of a Republican president. And honestly, I don't know whether to be concerned or relieved that Trump isn't practicing a lot of the things that he preached over the campaign.
Yeah, no, in many ways, we don't want Trump to do a lot of the stuff he said he would during his campaign. It will just be interesting if it's spun in a way where his supporters don't even realize that he doesn't do it. But plenty of time for that. Let's take a break. After the break, I want to talk about something people have emailed me over the weekend about, and I've really been thinking about. Is the president of the United States still the leader of the free world if that president is Donald Trump? We'll talk about that next. Join us on Reddit at davidpakman.com/Reddit. That is REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
A major issue during the upcoming Donald Trump presidency is going to be the embarrassment of Trump as president on the world stage. We know that U.S. standing and respect around the world was in the trash, in the toilet, call it where you want, under George W. Bush. We know that U.S. standing in the world has recovered significantly under President Obama. And it turns out that bombing other countries doesn't gain respect from the world community, no matter what neoconservative war hawks like Donald Rumsfeld and Paul Wolfowitz and the others tell you if you're president. Now, I predicted much worse under Donald Trump because the guy's a buffoon of the highest order, right? It's very plain to see to any clear-thinking individuals. And indeed, over the weekend on our Reddit discussion forum, davidpakman.com/Reddit, on our Facebook page, facebook.com/David Pakman Show, many people posting articles and questions and ideas about now that Trump's election has become real, who is the leader of the free world? Now, this is not a literal phrase, right? The leader of the free world is a colloquialism used first during the Cold War to talk about the U.S., or more commonly, the President of the United States of America. The President of the U.S. is the leader of the free world. And this is to suggest that among the democratic superpowers, the United States is the most powerful, and thus the leader of the United States is, by extension, the leader of the free world. Consensus is already shifting away from President of the United States when we think about President Trump, when we think about President-elect Trump swearing on that presumably Bible, or maybe the art of the deal, I don't know what it is Melania Trump will hold for him, to become president of the United States, that it is not going to be Trump who is the leader of the free world, but rather German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Time magazine has proclaimed German Chancellor Angela Merkel to be Chancellor of the free world after the election of Donald Trump. The New York Times is now describing Merkel as the liberal West's last defender. Timothy Garton Ash is arguing that Merkel could now be considered the leader of the free world. Obamacare may stay or go under Trump, as I told you earlier. Russia might play Trump like a Stradivarius violin, or they might not. That remains to be seen. Trump might build a wall, or he might build a fence and tell his supporters that he built the wall, or he might not. He might bamboozle the low information voters into thinking he made America great again, or maybe not. But a buffoonish sexual harasser who ridiculed everyone from disabled people to overweight women and stiffed his own workers and contractors countless times is not going to be seen by the free world as its leader. Now, you could argue that the most powerful person on the planet would be the president of China because of the size of China and its economy. But whether China is considered part of the colloquial free world is sort of under debate. So the discussion on our Reddit about this is really good. I encourage you to check it out. Bottom line, Pat, as Trump becomes president of the U.S., and the U.S. is increasingly ridiculed by those in other countries, as Russian and Chinese influence grow, if France replaces Francois Hollande with, for example, Marine Le Pen, and they go in an anti-EU direction, it's going to become clearer that Donald Trump is not the leader of the free world and that German Chancellor Angela Merkel may be.
But it's very scary that he will become the most powerful person on earth. Usually, if you see those rankings, Merkel will rank on there, but the top two go back and forth between the president of the United States and the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. And considering that Donald Trump will have both houses of Congress on his side and the Supreme Court, he'll be able to get a lot done. And he will probably be considered the most powerful person on earth. So brace yourself.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, I know that the trumpeters, here's the thing. If you tell a trumpeter, hey, you know what? The world is embarrassed about the guy you voted in. We're now saying Angela Merkel is the leader of the free world or whoever. They will say, that's good. We hate Europe. Those communist sissies, they will actually be emboldened if the international community shuns Trump. That's what's incredibly dangerous and concerning, that anything like that. We saw it under Bush. I think we will see it exponentially more under Trump because of the rhetoric he's used. They will see that as a justification for having elected Trump.
Well, it's interesting because the president of the United States is still the commander-in-chief of the largest army on the planet.
Yeah.
But, I mean, these days, the most important thing is diplomacy, working well with each other. So in that respect, I'm sure Merkel will take over that title.
I think there is really no question about it. I'm curious to hear from you, and I'm not so curious to hear from the trumpeters, but I know they'll contact me anyway. So at least keep it polite if you can. There is a potential disaster that we have to avert among the Democratic National Committee and the Democratic Party. Former Vermont Governor Howard Dean says he is running for his old job atop the Democratic Party. Dean tweeted on Thursday, "The Dems need organization and focus on the young, need a 50-state strategy and tech rehab. I am in for chairman again." Now, you might remember that from 2005 to 2009, Howard Dean was indeed chairman of the Democratic National Committee. Right now, Donna Brazile is serving as interim chairwoman after the disgraced Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepped down right before the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. I don't want lack of clarity right now. To channel Phil Davison, I want clarity this evening. Howard Dean, again, as president, as chair of the DNC, would be a disaster for Democrats. Do not put Howard Dean in that position. Now, before I get into the details of why now, let me remind you, when Howard Dean became a healthcare lobbyist and all of a sudden was against the single-payer healthcare he had been for most of his political life. Remember this video? Take a listen to this.
If I could interject as referee for a moment, I mean, it strikes me that the sort of legitimate good faith attack is to say, look, it was really hard to pass the ACA. Opening up a fight on health care politically could backfire, which is the most charitable version of what Chelsea Clinton was saying, as opposed to the idea that, like, Bernie Sanders is going to try to take away your health care, which seems implausible.
I don't think, well, I mean, yes, Bernie Sanders certainly had no intention of taking away anybody's health care. The question is, would his plan result in the kind of chaos of trying to implement it that in fact would undo people's health care? That people should be concerned about. Look, we're never going to have a sensible debate about this between now and the convention. It isn't going to happen. There's too much politics in it. But in fact, this is the classic race of the visionary and the pragmatist, and I've chosen the pragmatist.
Right.
All right, Howard Dean, thank you very much.
That is explanation as to why Bernie Sanders and his ideas are just not good. So not labeled, by the way, as a lobbyist, but showed up there and said, yeah, it's not really something we want to do. And then again on MSNBC, again not labeled as a lobbyist, equated super PACs to labor unions, which is such a bogus and depraved comparison. But here's what he did.
Was it a mistake politically to show herself to be so closely tied financially to the Wall Street
This got mentioned on Morning Joe the other day, and I said, well, I didn't think she'd done this, and Joe went and found out, that she'd given speeches to colleges, for example. It turned out that money was either put up by donors and had nothing to do with the colleges, and a lot of it was given back to the Clinton Foundation, which is a major charity which has done great things for people all over the world. Why does Hillary Clinton have to put up with a double standard? I don't hear anybody asking Bernie Sanders for his transcripts for some speech he made with the labor union. And for Bernie, even frankly, for Bernie to say that he doesn't have a super PAC, labor unions are super PACs. Now, they're super PACs that Democrats like, so we don't go after labor unions.
Wow.
But this is a double standard. I am tired of the attacks on Hillary Clinton's integrity.
Yeah, well, he's tired. We're still putting together our plan for the next few years, and already the Democrats are at risk of going backwards even more. This is a path backwards for Democrats. This is what ruined 2016 for Democrats, the selection of sort of establishment center-right ideas. I've been reading comments like, hey, wait, but Howard Dean was the architect of the 2008 Obama victory and the Democratic supermajority. Different situation. We would need to hear expressions of interest in involving less established and more progressive members of government. Slamming Bernie for being in support of single-payer healthcare is not sending the message, Pat, that the Democrats understand what went wrong in 2016.
And this will send a clear and resounding message that we're done with people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Brazile's and Hillary Clinton's. We want a true progressive to take over as the DNC chair.
Well, Politico reported late last week that Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders is backing Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota to be DNC chair. Ellison was a top surrogate for Sanders during the primary, And MoveOn.org also released a statement saying the DNC needs to clean house. Ellison would make an excellent chairman. That is a more reasonable idea. Now, there are Green Partiers and Jill Stein supporters who are saying, David, I'm against this. Ellison is not left enough. You got under 1% of the vote after a nonstop campaign about how great Jill Stein is. No one at the Green Party is ready to lead. I would not be taking any direction from the Green Party, but I would also not be taking any direction from the establishment DNC people, all of whom deserve to be fired. I can't justify anyone at the DNC keeping their job after what happened during the 2016 race and putting Howard Dean in there, who showed up, a lobbyist not labeled as such, on TV multiple times to defend Hillary Clinton's establishment ideas and trash Bernie. No, absolutely not. Do not take the step backwards if you are the DNC. And this is going to be high on our list of agenda items going forward. We'll take a break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I received, in the wake of the Donald Trump presidential election, the vilest hate mail that I believe I've ever received. And if you look at my hate mail folder, there are thousands upon thousands of emails in there. I'm going to show it to you in a second. The backstory of this entire situation is Donald Trump is one thing, right? But the violent and dangerous racists and xenophobes who have been emboldened by Donald Trump's election as president-elect are another thing. They are very disturbing and a top concern for all sorts of civil rights groups across the country. We're going to get into some of the broader data, but I want to give you just this first data point. Case in point, this is the vilest hate mail I've probably ever received, and I receive a lot. And this is just one example of the many that have come in after Donald Trump was elected. This is very aggressive. I'm just warning you. We are going to put it up on the screen. Some viewers may find this very disturbing, and I will read it to you. Let's take a look at it, Pat. This was an email from somebody using the email address gasakike at hotmail.com, probably a fake email address. These email addresses often just put in there as part of the entire thing. The subject, racist anti-white kikes fail to stop Trump. And it was from someone calling themselves Kikey Kikestein. The message to me, you are nothing but an inbred kike gas chamber rat, Pakman. No one listened to the SF Jew media this election, and no one ever will again. Everyone is now aware of you kikes promoting white genocide. You are effing finished, Jew boy. Enjoy your new president. Also over the weekend, I was home in Western Massachusetts. Racist, anti-Semitic, pro-Trump graffiti appeared on a cliffside in East Hampton, Massachusetts, on the cliffside on Mount Tom. Significant outrage from local residents. A bunch of my friends showed up and actually painted over it. It said everything from gas the Jews, kill all black people without using that word, Trump 2016, and swastikas. Also, some friends of mine in Greenfield, Massachusetts. This is a very liberal area where there were enclaves of Trump support, but by and large, a very liberal area, reporting that not far from, really right next to a synagogue in the Greenfield, Massachusetts area, a swastika carved into the sidewalk. Department of Public Works reportedly came out and ground it down. So many people reaching out and expressing concern for, number one, Jews, because it's very, very popular to just start blaming Jews, attacking Jews, etc. Despite the fact, by the way, that I think for the first time, we have members of the first family who will be Jewish under a Donald Trump administration. This proves, again, it's only partially about Trump, but it's mostly about who's emboldened by Trump. And number two, concern for people in progressive media as well. A lot of people over the weekend talking to me about that. I told you about the incident in Philadelphia at a Jewish-owned business, something like Hail Trump 2016 with swastikas on the glass window at the front. And there have been more than 200 incidents of hateful harassment or intimidation, which are anti-Semitic in nature, reported so far, Pat, to the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's just been hours since Trump's election. This is very scary stuff.
Yeah, and I'm shocked that this sort of thing could happen in Western Massachusetts, because when you think of Western Massachusetts, it's a very quaint, nice progressive area.
Yeah.
So it is surprising. But there's been so much coverage over the protests, the anti-Trump protests that have been going on over the past week or so, that are by and large nonviolent, peaceful. I'm worried about the more racist voices that are empowered under a Trump presidency.
They are feeling emboldened. They are feeling very emboldened. That email I got is only we can't do an entire show where I just read hate mail, but this was so particularly spiteful and vile and aggressive that I thought we would include it in our discussion today of this is not just me getting this stuff. We have a report from the ADL about the violent and aggressive attacks via Twitter and what I mean is linguistically violent. Obviously, you can't do physical violence via Twitter, although you can incite it against Jewish journalists and reporters, including Ben Shapiro, who is a right-winger who did not support Donald Trump. This is getting really, really serious, and we're going to keep covering it. By the way, speaking of anti-Semitism and Trump, Donald Trump has appointed Steve Bannon as White House chief strategist. Now, this is a totally abortive decision. Steve Bannon, the executive chairman of Breitbart News, who became the CEO of the Trump campaign, or the chairman, I don't remember exactly what word was ultimately used.
CEO.
CEO, heavily associated with the anti-Semitic alt-right movement, which we will be profiling in detail next week. I think you'll learn a lot about that movement next week. On yesterday morning's CBS Face the Nation program, Gingrich was asked by John Dickerson to respond to an essay which said, there's these fringe anti-Semites who are really supporting Trump's rise to the White House. And now you're taking Steve Bannon, a guy who's tied in with Breitbart and the alt-right and significant anti-Semitic movements. Isn't this a really bad sign? And Newt Gingrich, this is just amazing. He rejected the idea that Bannon is anti-Semitic by using anti-Semitic stereotypes. You can't write this stuff. Let's take a look at the video here.
We're on the anniversary of Kristallnacht, which was the night when the Nazis attacked Jewish businesses. And I'm thinking, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is a mainstream conservative who wants to profoundly take on the left. The left is infuriated that anybody would challenge the legitimacy of their moral superiority. And so the left goes hysterical. But the fact is, and you get this with all these smears of Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is a naval officer. He was a managing partner at Goldman Sachs. He was a Hollywood movie producer. The idea that somehow he represents, I'd never heard of the alt-right until the nutcase started writing about it.
But so your point is, it's garbage, therefore Donald Trump doesn't have to deal with it and let it go.
Donald Trump has to be Donald Trump.
So Steve Bannon can't be anti-Semitic because he worked in two industries stereotypically associated with Jewish control. He worked for Goldman Sachs, an investment banking firm, and Jews founded that. And of course, Jews control Hollywood. So this guy can't be anti-Semitic. See, otherwise, the cabals of Jews running those industries would never have allowed Bannon in. This is more acceptable when it's Jews, because imagine if the question was bias against black people and Newt Gingrich said, Steve Bannon, oh, no, he's not anti-black. He worked on a watermelon farm and at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Oh, okay, well, consider me corrected, Pat. Steve Bannon is not anybody we should be concerned with in terms of policy or ideas towards black or sentiment. That's the equivalent of what is being said. It's just more acceptable when it's smooth-talking Gingrich talking about finance and and Hollywood.
Yeah, I think Newt Gingrich actually made some of these comments subconsciously, right? He was trying to legitimize Steve Bannon as more than just an alt-right editor, right? Finance and Hollywood ties. So we'll see. It's concerning.
It's very disturbing. And this is not, by the way, all of the Steve Bannon stuff is not without basis. Court documents from 2007 revealed that his ex-wife, Mary Louise Picard, said Bannon didn't want their daughters going to a particular school in Los Angeles because there were just a lot of Jews that went there. He also stated, according to his ex-wife, that he doesn't like Jews and he doesn't like the way that they raise their kids. And this has been an explosion. Earlier in the show, I told you about the anti-Semitic hate mail I received. Southern Poverty Law Center receiving 200 plus complaints of anti-Semitic vandalism or incidents related to anti-Semitism. This type of thing, mark my words, will be attempted to be normalized by individuals like Steve Bannon and the alt-righters. And we've got a big expose on them coming up on Monday. Let's go to voicemail. The Eggman wrote in. The Eggman had some thoughts about everything that's going on. Of course, the voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. The Eggman called in, not wrote in, and here's what he had to say.
Hey, Dave. In discussing what a hypocrite Trump is already and all the usual suspects he lined up for his transition team, the guys that I work with, the low-information voters that voted for Trump, they hear this story right now. They don't even know any of those names. It means nothing to them. They don't even know what a transition team is. They have no clue of any of this stuff. All they know is Trump, 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 yeah. They don't care. All the nuances and all of the hypocrisy mean nothing to these people. They don't even understand. You're talking to liberals on your show that understand this, but the Trump people, they just hear blah, 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 Trump, 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 Trump. That's it. They don't care.
Yep.
It's very scary.
Couldn't say it better myself. We talked about the obvious hypocrisy of Trump saying, hey, I'm not the Washington guy. I'm running an outsider candidate. It's going to be non-establishment. And then within hours of becoming president-elect, he hires all the same Republican lobbyists and Aetna and Verizon lobbyists that everybody else hires. But a lot of his supporters have no clue what the hell is going on. Transition team, lobbyists, what? I don't know what's going on. I just voted for Trump because he's going to make America great again. Spot on by the Eggman. On the bonus show today, robots could replace 2/3 of all workers in the developing world, the developing world. I've got a couple of really funny stories and some that are a little bit more disturbing from over the weekend. I think people will really like today's bonus show. Sign up, support independent media, davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.